Welcome to the TechConnect podcast by the SoCal Tech Forum. I'm Jason Martin, and today I'm joined by Andy Oliva, founder of Lucky Day Labs, forum leader at the OpenAI Forum, and ambassador at HeyGen. In today's episode, Andy and I are going to explore how AI is reshaping product design, from changing expectations around modern user interfaces to the rise of AI-first experiences. We'll also discuss how businesses are adapting their services and pricing models to remain profitable and competitive in this new landscape. Andy, welcome back to the TechConnect podcast. Good to have you back again.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Great. So just a little context. So about 6 months ago, you were on the podcast. You had a great discussion with Chris, a lot of conversation around digital employees. And as we all know, the pace at which things change and advance with everything with AI right now is incredibly fast. So, over the past 6 months, I think there's been a ton that has, advanced with, in regards to AI agents. It's becoming a lot more common in, the products. We're seeing a lot of the pilots, move to production, and, the products that I use every day now have agents in them almost as standard. So what I'd like to kind of focus this discussion on today is really about how AI is impacting product design, how companies are thinking about it. I think you're kind of square in the middle of that, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But before we get into that, maybe you can open up for those that didn't hear our last podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what you're up to over at Lucky Day Labs.
Absolutely. Yeah. So frankly, 6 months ago seems like forever ago, which is kind of wild to think about. But, here we are. I think it's also exciting too. But so a little bit about me and Lucky Day Labs. So Lucky Day Labs is a creative AI agency. So basically I help companies figure out their AI strategy and I'll build things for them. We call ourselves your AI transformation partner because I feel like in this age with the rapid pace of change, it's not enough to just deliver a product or service and then it ends there. For whatever your project or initiative is, for it to be successful, I feel like it really needs to be more of like a partnership type thing. Like I'm helping you transform your company or your processes. And it means I have to understand them pretty well and be able to advise you as things change and adapt and evolve. In addition to that, I am a forum leader at OpenAI's official forums. And so their mission is AI adoption for the benefit of all of humanity. And so think fireside chats, discussion boards, in-person meetups, so on and so forth that I help with. There's people from different model companies there in the forum as well, so it's somewhat agnostic. And then I'm also a ambassador for HeyGen, which is, frankly, if you haven't heard of it, it's an AI avatar company where you can like clone yourself or make characters and you can animate them with text. So
very cool. Yeah. So you're here today to talk to the community about product design and how AI is impacting that. So give me a little bit of your thoughts on how it's changing the process. So whether it's from the workflows that designers go through to how it's actually showing up from a user perspective in those products.
Yeah, how much time do we have? Because I could talk for hours about this.
Let's get started.
So just a few things. Number one, earlier this year, SaaS apocalypse happened, and it caused sort of a panic. Valuations of these like legendary companies sort of plummeted. Everyone was worried about, what is the role of SaaS in a world where anyone can just build their own thing, their own software in like a week or two using Claude Code or Codex or Lovable or whichever platform you would want to choose, right? And so I think part of that is a little bit of panic. I think part of it is actually warranted because we have to go through a rapid change. And I've been saying this for a while. But that being said, we're all asking the same question, which is, okay, what is the purpose of software now in this world that we're going into? And I think it's a good thing that we're all talking about it because that's how we're going to figure it out. But I think there's a few key things that I'm seeing right now, which is if you're a company and you're offering something, you need to think about offering it as, instead of SaaS as software as a service, think of it as service as software, right? Like whatever it is you do, what is the service part of that, and how do you offer that as a piece of software that that's modular, that people can use, right? So think of this like plugins or skills that Claude Code or Codex could use, right? So if you're a company, why don't you have a plugin, right? That is, to me, that's product design.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's how people are going to interact with your product. So if I'm using Codex and I want to create a new web app, right? Supabase, which is a database company that I can build my app off of, for those who don't know, it needs to have a plugin in Codex that I can just easily install it, and it has all of the schema, all of the best practices. It can inform the agent what to do and when and how and troubleshooting, and give it all of the information that is trained off of all of Supabase expertise in database management and database architecture at scale, right? That maybe Codex doesn't have necessarily the nuances of, right? Because Supabase has been doing that for years, right? Similar if you wanted to use AWS. There's all of this expertise that you need to figure out, okay, how do I get this in front of people and meet them where they are, right? So I think now the question remains, okay, how do we monetize that, right? And so I think we could be entering a world where some companies will choose to offer a plugin as sort of like part of a subscription that you pay or something, or part of a plan that you're on. Maybe part of the plugin is free, and then another part of it, so on and so forth, is something that they monetize. And then that comes with a certain level of like, you get a Supabase expert that can, sort of like an account executive or something that can help you in case something happens, right? Or can verify, right? Like, hey, what if my app needs 1 million users? Like, it was set up, the database was set up like this, but is this good best practices? Can we confirm that? And then they're the human expert, and they'll verify, and they'll say, yes, it was, so on and so forth. And then as a builder, when I go, publish my app or whatever it is, I can say this was built using Supabase's plugin, and that's a trust signal for other people to use it. So I think that's one area, but I can keep going if you want, or if you have any questions on that. But I think another area is that, again, whatever you're building, you have to try to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think there's so many apps already, so many platforms already, and I think that's going to increase with everybody being empowered to make their own things as well, right? Where, frankly, I think it's going to feel overwhelming for a user, whether technical or not, to get access to like 10 or 15 different platforms and apps every week. So if whatever you're building, I think it needs to be voice AI first and iMessage or RCS first. Meaning, why can't I interact with your service or your product via voice? Yeah. Where like an AI just calls me and we have a natural discussion, right? And there's a whole sort of conversation design that needs to happen there so that the user knows that, hey, this isn't those, crappy phone tree automated robot systems that I'm used to, right? This is something you can talk about naturally, just like you would a human. And that voice AI can do a bunch of different things. And then that's what your service, that's the product experience. That's the service experience that whatever it is you're building has. Same thing, like, let's say, here's an example. Let's say you're an insurance company. Like, why can't I handle everything over a voice AI? And then if I need to upload like proof of something, like a photo of something, right? The agent just says, hey, I just text you, right? A link, or can you text me your photo? Even like, forget the link. Like, let's make it even simpler. Like, I should just be able to text a photo to it and it'll say, oh, I got it. Cool. And then it does all of the stuff behind the scenes. So I don't have to worry about, oh, how do I learn this dashboard, or where's this button over here, or what's this website, or this login, or this yada, yada, yada. And so I think that's a good example of meeting users where they are. And historically, that sort of thing was incredibly expensive, complex, and time-consuming, but it's not anymore. And so I think that's where product design and direction should go. But in addition to plugins and skills, meeting users where they are, I think there are still going to be use cases where like a dashboard interface or an app interface makes sense. But I think what those things do now changes. So those things become more of like storefronts, I think, that sort of communicate the brand and the company, but not necessarily a place where everything happens. Similar to like how you go to a retail store today, or like you go to the Apple store, right? So they don't have every single Apple product there on display, right? You can order things, right? You can get expertise about things, right? You can get a chance to like use the product and pick it up and see it for yourself and maybe ask a couple questions. And I think that it needs to steer towards that. And then the bulk of things should happen in voice or in text or whatever whatever combination of those two mediums. Because what I've seen is that I'll have an app that I love and then I forget that I have it. Yeah. Right? And so if you're trying to design a product for that and you're like, wait, that happens to me too. So is that going to happen to my users, right? I hope not. How do we get around that? So I think that a way around that is to have the voice agent or the text agent follow up with whoever your user is, saying like, just text them like, hey, do you remember this? Or hey, do you want that? Or I did this for you, or I did that for you, in a way that's not spammy, that's not like annoying, that like genuinely provides them value. Because I think there are cases where I do want to be reminded, right? Like I want it to follow up with me and tell me this is what you need to do. This is what you said you were going to do. Or like, hey, there's this event happening over here, don't forget about it, sort of thing. So I know that was a lot, but I think those three things.
Well, I think what I take away from that is that, users are expecting a far easier user interface, one that matches their preference for how they choose to interact, whether it's through text, like you said, through voice, whatever that might be. And I think that a lot of the newer companies, I think, are meeting those needs much more than, some of the long-standing, platforms that have been in the market for a long time. I mean, me, myself, I'm involved with a lot of the tech stack that we have within the marketing team at my company, right? And we're going through the process now where, every time some renewal comes up, where, we have a platform that has been the industry standard for 10 years, right? We're looking at every single one of these and saying like, are they the dial-up of software? Like, have they fallen so far behind where they're not serving our needs anymore? And many of the platforms that come out now, the user interfaces are brilliant. They're intuitive, they're easy to use, and they just make everything faster. I feel everybody is so much more time constrained these days, and the preference is towards ease of use.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's right. I think everybody for the past, 3 decades has wanted to make great software, but often what stopped that from happening was technical complexities, like engineering spend and how much time and bandwidth a company could dedicate towards making great software. And so that was always sort of like an excuse, like, oh, well, we wanted it to be this way, but it would have cost like $200,000, right?
Sure.
So it was kind of like, okay, I get it, sort of thing. But now I don't think that's an excuse anymore, right? And so I think everybody's got to step up their game. If software doesn't run really well, if it's not beautiful, if it's not intuitive, then what are you doing? Like, what are we doing here, right? Like, and not to be too hard on people, I think there's still always reasons for these things, but frankly speaking, if you have to do that now, like there's like you don't have as much wiggle room. Otherwise, the company's not going to survive if you don't adapt to those sort of things.
Yeah.
And the AI can do design pretty well. But I think that's encouraging. But I think that a fundamental part of design is deciding what to show and where and how. It's sort of sifting through the noise and saying, out of like 20 different things the user could do, what 2 or 3 things do we want them to do here and here and here, and how do we communicate that? That I have not seen AI necessarily get 100% right yet. Maybe that will change, but I still think that's going to continue to be something that differentiates, right? Does it have a good onboarding experience that explains things in a really simple, easy way that's not overwhelming, right? Is it directing the user's attention in the ways that it should, right? All of those different things really have to be dialed in now, where before I think you could kind of get away with it. But I think here's another thing that's encouraging, to go back to the SaaS apocalypse thing and everybody's fears about, getting replaced by AI software. We have had websites that were easy to make for over a decade now. Before that, making a website was actually pretty, I'm sure a complicated task, right?
Oh, yeah. I still remember designing websites in Flash.
Okay.
Yes. I was from those days.
Yeah, and it's fun. Actually, do you remember that letter Steve Jobs wrote where he said he hated Flash and how controversial it was, and it got him so much hate because everybody loved Flash.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, Flash is terrible. Stop using Flash. And then slowly but surely, nobody uses it anymore. But my point is that when these no-code builders came out, like Wix, so on and so forth, it meant that website design was way cheaper and making a website was way easier. Like, you can go buy a domain in like Squarespace and they'll like spin up a website for you within like 5 minutes, right?
Yep.
That would have taken months, right? In the 90s or even the 2000s. Okay. And so the cost of making a website and the complexity of making a website lowered dramatically. But it's 2026. And I still see really terrible websites. Okay, like frankly, okay? Why does that happen? It's not a technical reason.
Yeah.
It's a cultural reason.
Yep.
Right? Businesses, website owners, for whatever reason, they've decided it's not a priority or it doesn't make a meaningful difference to their business. Maybe they're right. Maybe it has no effect on their business. Maybe they get all of their business through word of mouth and their customers don't look at their website. And so they're like, well, what's the point, right? But this dynamic, I think, hasn't changed. Humans haven't changed, right? So even in this AI era, you're still going to have companies and businesses, I think, that choose not to do it, right? And I think that they'll still be fine because it takes human beings, I think, sometimes 5-10 years to like meaningfully adapt culturally, broadly across, culture in California, culture in the United States, culture in the world, right? These things still take time. So,
and it's up to the user to define or the builder to define what to prioritize in the user interface. You have the great websites or the great user interfaces are designing with, the end user's preferences in mind. Whereas I think a lot of the ones in the interfaces that are not the greatest to use are the ones that, they might recreate their org structure, the mindset of their org structure within the user interface because everything fits into neat boxes that they can track or they can deliver business to a specific area of the company, whatever it might be, which is not, innately customer centric, right? So I think to your point, it can be very, very easy to build. But if the way you're defining your specifications and the build everything up front is not intuitive, then it's not going to win.
Yeah, I agree. And I've been saying this, I've said this before, and I'll keep saying it. This period we're in with AI, it lowers the barrier to entry, but it raises the ceiling of expectation at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of like this, or maybe it's like that, right? So, if you're a website designer, right, and you could, design, let's say, 5 websites a month before AI. Okay. Now you have to design 10 websites a month because now I know how easy it is to spin up a website using like Codex or Lovable, right? So I'm going to be like, well, why is he still only making, why is she or he only making 5 websites? And they better look much better, right? And they better nail
pay less money because I know it's easier, right? Because I'm not valuing all of the expertise you bring to the table.
One of those things has to give. Either whatever you're doing as a website designer has to become cheaper, and you have to do twice as many as you did before because it's 3 times as easy to do. Or the quality of what you're outputting has to like go 5 times better, and then I'll still pay the same price, sort of thing, right? And that extends beyond just the product design itself. What about the service? Like, how easy is it for me to buy a website from you? How easy is it for me to get support if something goes wrong or if I have a question? Is that like immediate? Like, as a website designer for your business, do you have a voice AI and a text AI that's linked and the conversation design is done really well, right? And when I call it, I almost immediately get it fixed. That's the standard, the new standard of expectation that we're at now, right? And so that's going to be a differentiator between agencies, right? Because look, if I can spin up a website in like 2 hours using Codex, and it takes you 2 hours to to change the text on a website you designed for me, why would I use you? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this sounds kind of harsh, but I'm just being honest. Like, this is what people are saying. Like, they might not say it to each other's faces, but behind the scenes, I think that's what they're saying. So
yeah, and a great example, bringing it back to the user interface and how users prefer to interact. I just went through an entire evaluation of newer gen marketing automation platforms, right? We're displacing what we had in already in place, and we're looking at some of the new ones. And what I start to see more and more as a trend is the primary mode of user interaction is now with a prompt box. So instead of having to know exactly if I want to build a customer segment or if I want to audit all my content that I have, instead of actually going through manually doing these steps, I can just ask the prompt box whatever. So if we're updating our pricing, I can give it an instruction and say, hey, give me all the emails that we send out, whether it's a promotional email or an automated email that mentions our pricing. So give me an audited log of that so I know what to update and then move forward with all of these updates. That would have taken so much time to do in the past. And now it's just a simple prompt. And actually, even some of them aren't even prioritizing their in-app UI. They say, you know what? Just plug right into Claude, and Claude is now your user interface. So we don't have to worry about prioritizing buttons and all of that. Now you can just interact with Claude and tell my system what to do, and that's how you interact. So are you seeing this as becoming? Is this going to be the new pattern of software design? What's your input?
Absolutely. I think everybody's getting much more used to interacting with software using a prompt box. The analogy I give is like when the iPhone first came out, the trend was like skeuomorphic design that like replicated real life interactions and real life objects. Like the Notes app looked like a notepad, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how everybody interacted with notes. And so it was familiar. iOS 7, what it did is it got rid of skeuomorphism because we had like 7 years of interacting with phone software. And so culturally, everyone sort of learned that. And so they could go to the next level and we could like leave skeuomorphism behind, so to speak, because everybody got used to interacting with phone software. Similarly, that same thing is happening with AI, is everybody's starting to get used to prompt boxes. it hasn't taken 7 years. It's only taken like 2, less than that maybe.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks to how much faster everybody's learning or how much faster things are moving than they used to. But I think that your software should have a prompt box, either as a core component of how the user interacts with whatever software you've designed, or it should be like constant, like in a sidebar or like as a little widget. But I think it also needs to be able to take control of the interface for you. Mm-hmm. Like it needs to be able to navigate to pages. And I don't necessarily even mean like a Perplexity or a Claude Code computer use where it actually takes a mouse and navigates around that. It could do that. A little bit more technically difficult, but I think an easier way is you can give the agent in the prompt orchestration at the software level hooks into different pages of the app. And so it can actually, behind the scenes, see the app and it can navigate for the user. Like, so if I say, show me a report of everything that happened with the company last month, how much revenue did we bring in? And it'll take you to the revenue dashboard page of the interface, and then it will do all of the filters for you based on your request, and then it'll show it to you. And then you say, oh, I don't want this column, and then it'll change it for you, right? I think that's where things have already moved in some instances, and I think that trend is going to continue. But I think another, and this is where all the details are very important. People are sort of hesitant to pay for API costs and API tokens as well for AI, right? And so I think if you're designing a product, you have to be cognizant of that, right? So this is something Sam Altman announced on X yesterday, which is you can now use your OpenAI subscription in OpenClaw. So you don't have to hook up the OpenAI API and then pay for credit use with each API call. If you have a ChatGPT Pro subscription or or Plus or whichever subscription level you have, OpenClaw just uses that, which is huge, right? This was like a big controversy with Claude Code because they turned that off and so on and so forth.
OpenAI responded immediately.
Well, right? Yeah, I mean, look, good move, I guess you could say, but I think that be cognizant of that. I was testing out something called Pika. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's this. No. It's an AI avatar agent that runs off of OpenClaw, like behind the scenes. It's actually pretty cool. It's still in beta right now, but they also allowed me to select a bunch of different models and enter in my API keys if I wanted to. But it also allowed me to just authenticate with my Codex ChatGPT subscription. So that way I'm already paying for Codex, so now I don't have to pay for API calls every time I use this agent, right? Because if you are doing that as a user, I have to make a trade-off and say, well, if I only have like $50 in tokens to give Pika, I'm just going to do it in Codex because I'm only paying $20 a month here or $100 and my usage is almost unlimited, right?
Sure.
So I think when I say design, you think, or people's mind immediately goes to like, what does the interface look like, right? But I think this is also part of design, is thinking like, how are they going to use it? What is the user thinking in their head, like around how are they measuring trade-offs like costs and ease of use and things like that as well.
Absolutely. And I think you hit on a couple really important things that I'd like to touch on. First is designing for AI agents, but also the cost aspects of it, because I think we're hearing a lot more about things like what do they call it, agent swarming or whatever, that are ballooning costs. But let's talk about designing for agents. So, you bring up a good point. When you're thinking about product design, we hear a lot more about agent first design now. Can you tell me a little bit about that, and how does that differ from what you have to think about from like a human-centric or a human-first design?
So the agent has to have eyes, it has to have context, and it has to be able to get access to whatever it is very easily. So that means like maybe if you're not going to use like a computer use thing and you're going to use like the back-end hooks that I mentioned earlier where the agent can like navigate around your dashboard, like that has to, if you're designing your software agent first, like you have to give it those hooks and you have to explain that that's what you're trying to do. And that's how you have to design your back-end infrastructure to be able to accomplish that. So, I mean, look, you could do computer use. You could do that like back-end navigation manually. I think it's up for each product designer to make that call. And then going to like the context, it needs to have access to whatever MCPs it needs very easily. It needs to have, or APIs if you don't want to do MCPs, right? And then ideally, and I hope this is where we start to head, is like, so I was just building, I'm building a new software right now, and I just hooked it up to Codex's remote app server, right? Which means that it can use Codex that's running on my computer as sort of a remote app, and it can access all of that. I would love it if I could design that so that the Codex agent I've built in my software dashboard has this almost the same things that my Codex app has, all the skills, all the plugins, all the memories, everything, so that it's almost like this seamless experience across interfaces. And I can basically just embed my own Codex in whatever software I'm making. And then this could be replicated for users as well, right? We sort of talked about this on the last podcast I did a few months ago with Chris, which is like, what is the moat?
Yeah.
In this world, right? And I think those friction points are still moats, right? So I can't, when I go in a Tesla and I talk to Grok, like I have to still keep in mind that Grok knows certain things that Codex doesn't know, and vice versa about me, right? Or I talked to Grok about this, I didn't talk to Codex about that. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's this sort of juggling, and that's like a friction point that ensures that like people use Grok, right? If people are driving Teslas all the time, and they're talking to Grok all the time, then it's less likely that they're going to start talking to ChatGPT about something. And so think about that. That's a hardware moat. It's also a software moat, right? And I think that sort of thing is going to continue. That being said, and that was one of my predictions on the last podcast, but that being said, there is a caveat that I've seen. So what I said was that moving in between those platforms and that context and the memories was a moat. But what I've seen now is that, Claude and OpenAI have made it so you can download all of your memories from your agent, and you can then provide them to like Claude if you wanted to switch from OpenAI, for instance, or you could do the same thing vice versa, right? So technically it's possible, but again, I still think it's a friction point because the user has to know that that's possible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they have to actually go do it.
Yeah.
And then it has to actually work. Right. And then there can't be problems. So, but I still think that, that applies today. And I think that will continue to apply. So same, and these little things sound silly, but these like little tiny friction points on their own, they might not seem like a lot, but when you add 2, 3, 4, 5 little friction points, that's a lot.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And we saw this play out just with like iMessage and RCS.
Yeah.
You're like, what do you mean? It's just blue. Okay, well, that's a friction point, right? If I text you and it's green, it's like, what? Why is it green? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It made a difference. I'm not saying it should have, but I'm just saying it did. So like, what do we do about it, right?
Yeah. Interesting. So let's now shift the conversation a little bit to how businesses are adapting. We talked a lot about, now this agent first design. Businesses are changing the services that they offer to customers, their pricing models, their costs in some cases are ballooning using, more agents to build their products. So let's start there, and maybe we could talk a little bit about what are the trends and the patterns that you've seen with businesses and how they're changing, the services that they offer to their customers, and how do they think about, pricing those services so they stay competitive.
Do you want me to sort of talk about AI businesses or software tech businesses, or just like general businesses like
Let's talk about software tech. Okay. For example, a business that has provided a traditional SaaS product and is now thinking about, okay, we need to provide these either agent-first experiences, or we got to shift now to a consumption-based model. Let's talk about how businesses are thinking about that.
Look, in my talks and what I've seen people are already starting to move into like, okay, how do we think about this as a plugin or like a skill or something like that? And so I think that those things are encouraging. And I think that's the right strategy. I think the tricky thing is figuring out how to monetize it. I haven't seen that yet. Because in the early time, whenever these early things happen, you want to get as many people using your service as possible. So, this is like a tried and true playbook where people will offer something for free, and then later on, as they scale, they'll start charging for it. Granola is a good example, right? The note-taking app, right? They just started charging all of their users that originally signed up like a monthly subscription of like $10 or whatever. But this is where I think courage matters, because Granola designed this little AI software that's quite powerful because of all of the prompt orchestration that they've done and the details around making sure the AI gets good audio quality of its recording. I could build that in an afternoon using Codex, right? I haven't. Why?
I don't know. Why?
Okay. Because the brand is so good. It has all of my memories. It has all of my chats.
Yeah.
They spent a ton of time troubleshooting the prompt orchestration and the agent orchestration. They have skills that are specialized towards summarizing notes and meetings that they've tested over like hundreds of meetings. Right. Yeah. And then the courage around, even then, like let's say you didn't buy any of that. I think it took courage for them to offer an MCP server or a plugin in Codex that I can now talk to Codex to get all of my notes. Right? I'm still using Granola because they offered a plugin.
Yeah.
And they did that almost immediately. Right? If they didn't do that, after 2 weeks of me not getting a plugin from them, I would have been like, okay, I'm not using Granola anymore. I was using Codex now. Where are my notes? I'm just going to make this myself on Sunday. Do you get what I'm saying?
Going back to meeting the user where they're at.
And it has to happen fast.
Yeah.
Like Granola moved incredibly quickly. That took courage, right? Because I'm sure there was somebody in a meeting there that said, well, if we give them a plugin, why would they use Granola? Like, aren't we going to...
And there's that perceived value where, many companies believe that the UI is how, customers perceive value. You have to log in. There's metrics, proven metrics around that they try and optimize off of, right? And those all change.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think it's important to still optimize, but I think it can miss the point. Like, again, like if you think about like the Apple Store analogy, like when you walk into the Apple Store, maybe like not everybody buys something, right? But the amount of value Apple gets from communicating their thing, their ethos, their brand to somebody that just walks in the store is like priceless. Companies, you're in marketing, right? Companies pay tons of money just to get a brand in front of someone in a positive way, just to get them to remember it, right? And so I think that needs to be sort of a philosophical underpinning of whatever your software is. It's really just like giving your user a sense of what your brand is about, what it can do, right? Even if it, from a metric side, they didn't click this button, or they didn't go to that dashboard, right? Or they didn't log in, right?
Yeah.
Don't lose sight of these abstract things that you can't track on a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And how are you thinking about that, at Lucky Day Labs? So you have this whole experimentation model, and you're constantly building, new products. Tell me a little bit about how you think about your experimentation model and how you choose what products you want to bring to market.
Yeah. So I structured Lucky Day Labs like a lab, right? Not like the big labs like OpenAI or like Claude or Anthropic, right? But as a sort of a product innovation lab that uses AI native tools, the state of the art, whatever the latest trend is. So think of like a lab at a university. They run experiments and then they publish research based off of what they learn from the experiments, right? So similarly, Lucky Day Labs, we run experiments and then we create products based off of what we learn from the experiments. And I think that this is probably going to become the only way to keep up with how fast things are changing, because I can't wait for an article to publish in a week.
Yeah.
Right? Because OpenAI released 5.5, last week, and then maybe Anthropic is going to release Opus 4.8, a week from now, and that's no time whatsoever, and it could fundamentally change how things operate. And so I think you have to be sort of in the weeds or in the front lines, so to speak, of like where the product innovation is happening, what new tools are being done and how. And the best way to get signal is to just experiment for yourself. And so that means if you're a business, I encourage you to orchestrate your teams around an experimentation model where you allow for rapid prototyping and rapid development and rapid iteration. And that means you might need to be radical around how you change your processes, right? Like we can't wait a week for a PRD anymore, guys. Like, so I'm not saying I know how your business runs per se, but I'm saying you have to rethink that, right? Maybe you'll come up with something better than I can come up with, but I'm just saying you can't wait that long anymore in the example of granola, right? Because those 1 or 2 weeks could mean the difference between the software dying or it living, right?
Absolutely.
Which is crazy to think about, but here we are. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah, and we hear about it all the time. I mean, you and I were at Human X about 3 weeks ago, and I heard this a lot from the small businesses. Is what they're most afraid about is they're going to wake up one day and a new model push has been brought out into the market, and their entire business model is obsolete overnight. So I'm wondering if that's also a way to protect businesses and make sure that they can stay ahead of the curve, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I would say for people implementing AI, try and do it as agnostically as possible, so that if something like some new model comes out or whatever, then it's much easier for you to shift and adapt. But that being said, like frankly, it's a full-time job keeping up with, like it's a new role in a company, keeping up with the nuances of how fast everything is changing.
It is.
And so, I don't know, like, I think you should have somebody in your company that does that, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of what I offer to people, right? Because I do that I'm constantly keeping up with things full time, right? So, and at the end of the day, these implementation strategies are decisions that teams and business owners will make. And some of them are going to make the wrong decision. And some of them are going to make the right decision. And that's sort of a differentiator, right? And so the question, if you're a small business, is who do I have making that decision, and do I trust them to make that decision? And if not, why? Right? If they don't know and they haven't experimented with the latest models that came out this morning while we were talking on this podcast, then that is a warning sign.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, you can cut them some slack, give them a break. Like, this is a tough time we're in with things moving quickly, but I think that should be like the goal. That's where the goalpost should be moved towards.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah, and I think it's important. I remember Jensen Huang talked about giving your employees permission to experiment, right? And you got to give your employees not just the permission, but also the time and the tools that are necessary to arm them with the ability to do that experimentation. So that's great.
And to touch on that, I'm glad you brought this up. This is something I've seen throughout my career at multiple different companies. And I think this is where a lot of AI implementations in large companies, this is why they've failed. One of the reasons. You saw that McKinsey report, I'm sure that happened, was a few months ago. But it's one thing for a manager or a CEO or a leader to go and talk to his team and say, you guys have to use AI. We bought this Copilot subscription for you. Use AI.
Yeah.
Right? And then what happens? Nobody uses it. Why? Because they need the leadership team it's not enough, right? Because the employees have like a million things on their plate, right? Their bandwidth is constrained, and they have other incentives that are like KPI metrics that they have to adhere to. And so if you don't tie AI adoption to those KPI metrics, I'm not saying I know how you should do it, but I'm just saying that's what should be done, right, for your specific business. They're not gonna adopt it, right? They might say they will, they might want to, but if it's not tied to their bonus, if it's not tied to their salary, if it's not tied to their career progression, right, I think it might just be lip service.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So
Or they're not going to experiment with anything that's going to move the needle enough to matter, right? They'll do slight optimizations on their current workflows rather than say do something and thinking bigger and do something that'll drastically change the organization.
And I think that people have, rightly or wrongly, they're somewhat cynical.
Yeah.
Right? Because they might think, well, they're just going to try and replace us.
Yep.
And so in the back of their head, they're not really bought in. They're not really invested. And so, you have to think about this. It's not enough to just give lip service and say, we're not going to do that. We're not going to replace you. We're not going to do this, right? You actually have to show it, right? You have to promote someone who embraced AI fully and say to everyone, this is why we promoted them, right? Because it's like putting your money where your mouth is. Your actions speak louder than the words, right? And so I'm not so presumptuous as to tell people how to run their companies or how to run their teams. I'm just communicating what I see from behind the scenes and different places across different companies, large enterprises and startups throughout my career, and talking with clients. So, and look, I think managers and leaders know this, right? They instinctively know this. What I'm pushing is, I think you should do something about it if you know it. And that needs to be your focus. So it's more of I'm trying to coach you and encourage you, please do this. Don't forget about this.
Don't tell me, show me.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Right.
So.
All right. So, typically when we wrap up here, I always like to think a little forward-looking, right? But before we go into that, when you ended the last podcast, I believe you and Chris made a few predictions around where things are going. Fast forward 6 months. What can you say? Were there any of those predictions that you could say have materialized? And tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I touched on briefly earlier today was the moats thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to continue to be the case. Friction points still matter in terms of people moving things over. It has to reach a certain critical mass for that to not be the case anymore. So I think a new moat is plugins and skills, right? Plugging into Codex and Cloud Code and things like that. So your product should have that, and figure out how to monetize that and how to figure out how to get that in front of users, right? I think that's going to be a new moat. I think another thing that I talked about sort of as a prediction is I said I didn't think that as many jobs were going to go away as people were saying. I think this is sort of a complicated one because we have sort of a cultural dynamic. So Jack Dorsey got rid of a bunch of people at Block, right? And he explicitly said it was because of AI. So I think it's tricky because there will be some cases where companies look at things and maybe they did hire too many people and maybe AI has improved efficiency and so they don't need as many people anymore. But I think it's also true that there's some companies where they can't get enough tokens for their AI models and they can't hire enough people. Jensen from NVIDIA, he's famously said this, right? He's said sort of the opposite of what Jack did, which is got rid of a bunch of people. He says he can't hire enough people and he can't spend, he's giving his engineers $200K a year in token budgets alone, right? Just to use software tokens. Now, I don't know the intimacies of what happened with Block, but I can say that my experience is that more of the NVIDIA approach, which is try and figure out not how to necessarily cut a bunch of costs with AI, but figure out how you can increase productivity instead, right? So here's an analogy. Let's say you have a team of 5 people and they're all starting to use Codex and now they've become 5 times more productive, each of them.
Yep.
Okay. Let's say there's another company. They have 1 engineer and they also are using Codex and they also have become 5 times more productive. Which company is more productive? The first one.
Yeah.
So we still have this multiplier of if you add more people, you still get a multiplier of productivity, right? Which means you can be more competitive, right? And you have to do that because of how quickly things are moving now.
Yeah, yeah.
Going back to granola. Could one person roll out that plugin in a day? Maybe, maybe not. Could 3 people do it in 2 hours? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that means you need 3 engineers that are AI native to keep up with the pace of change. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's why I think and this is something Jensen has talked about too from NVIDIA, where don't confuse the skills it takes for your job role with the job itself. An engineer has a bunch of skills that they take part in to do their job, right? But while those skills might shift because of AI, like they're not using a traditional IDE, they're using Codex, you still need an engineer type role.
Yeah.
Right? Because now, as I've mentioned, the expectations have increased, right? They've moved up the stack, just like to use an engineering example, they're not early on they were coding at the firmware level.
Yep.
Right? And then operating systems came out, and like almost no engineer coded at the firmware level. They coded at the operating system level. We've moved up another stack, the AI native coding orchestration level, right? But you still need an engineer, builder, type, designer to do that.
Absolutely. So. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap up. So in 30 seconds, if you were to give advice to an owner, a founder today, what would that be?
Don't believe the AI doomerism. There has been a lot of false information around AI, around like environmental damage and water use and so on and so forth, even like copyright and ethics and stuff. I would say just be really skeptical of those arguments, because if they get in the way or they create a culture of AI hesitancy, then ultimately it's going to be self-destructive. Mm-hmm. It's going to damage your business and your ability to adapt. You can still implement AI in like an ethical way that works for your business, and I encourage you to do that. But look, if you don't do it, other businesses are going to go to other countries or other states or other cities where that there isn't a culture of AI hesitancy, and they're going to outcompete. Like, I'm not saying that's how it should be. I'm just telling you that's how it is, right? And so we have to. My advice is you have to look at that frankly and like honestly, right? So
great. All right. And just to wrap things up, if our listeners want to learn more about you and what you're up to over at Lucky Day Labs, where can they find out more about you?
Sure. LuckyDayLabs.ai is the best place to start.
Wonderful. Andy, thanks so much for joining us today. Look forward to the discussion later.
Awesome.
This podcast is brought to you by Human Studio. Human Studio is an award-winning design studio specializing in web design, branding design, video production, and so much more. We'd love to help you take your brand to the next level.
Thank you for listening to the TechConnect podcast. Don't forget to stay connected and explore more at www.socaltechforum.org. We'll see you next time.